Okay, who's talked so far?
I think my guy was the associate provost of engagement.
Okay. All right. You remember any others?
The other woman was Congress representative around here.
Oh, is that Sheila Klinker? Okay. She's a good friend of our cause, so I like Sheila. Yeah, yeah. Good. All right. I don't know if I'm just supposed to start. I'll wait a little bit. I'm going to wait a little bit. I don't think this is everybody. So you might need a pen and paper, and I wanted to make it as casual as possible. And I'm going to tell you my story because I think everyone's story is kind of unique. First 3 rows, please. First 3 rows. No sloping in the back. I want to make this as close as possible. And I'm interested in what you want to know about leadership. So some of that will be hopefully sparked by my story, but you all have your own individual story, and I know the purpose of this is to give you access, if you like, to leaders from different industries, different parts of society, and so I want to know what you want to know because I want to make it as kind of practical as possible. So at any point, if you have questions, write them down, and we might stop along the way and you can ask questions. But basically what I want to do is just tell you my story and the positions that I've found myself in and ways that I've had to learn about leadership. And then if there are certain concepts or aspects of that you're most interested in, then you can fire away, okay? I don't want this to be a sit back and then leave at the end. I want it to be a conversation. And I want to be the conversation starter and just tell you a little bit about my background. Do you think it's okay to start? Yeah? Okay. So my name is Tom Elliott, and I am the director at Habitat for Humanity of Lafayette. So how many of you have heard of Habitat for Humanity? Are any of you in the EPICS team that works at Habitat of Lafayette? We got 3 here? Okay, good. We'll give you a special favor as we go. No, I won't. Just kidding. I am from England originally, not Australia, so you can stop guessing. I have to tell this up front because a lot of times when you talk and you see people kind of doing this, and I know that they're trying to figure out where I'm from, and then they're missing what I'm talking about. And so I'm from Newcastle. Anyone heard of the town of Newcastle? Yeah? Northeast coast of England, nowhere near London, and it's close to the Scottish border. All right, and do you know anything about Newcastle? The beer. Okay, that's one of the things that people know about Newcastle. The second is Newcastle was a highly industrial town. All right, and so coal's from Newcastle, if you've ever heard that phrase. It powered a lot of the European Industrial Revolution, the coal mines around there. And then the second thing is that it was big for shipbuilding. And so they say at one point, or at some point in history, 1 in 6 ships that were made in the world were made in Newcastle. They made the biggest warships in the world at some point before they outsourced all the shipbuilding to other shores. All right, so it's a highly industrial town. It's very working class. And my parents were not from there originally, but they moved there. And I was actually born, the only one of my family that was born in Newcastle. It's a very proud town. I wish it was more famous for its soccer club. Any soccer fans in here? Yeah, okay. But it's not, because they haven't had much success in a long time. I used to liken them to the Chicago Cubs before the Cubs won the World Series. We still haven't won anything, but the Cubs have won the World Series, okay? I am the youngest of 3 siblings. Anyone the youngest in here? Oh, again, we've got a lot of... All right, and my sister is 5 years older than I am, and my brother is 3.5 years older than I am. And this is significant in my story. 1, that I'm the youngest, and 2, that there is quite a large gap between me and them, okay? I was born, my parents were, I would label them as hippie progressives, but also evangelical Christians. All right, so it was an interesting environment that my parents created when I was a child. And I'm going to kind of break up my story into kind of 5 or 6 sections, and I'm kind of setting the scene right now. And I think that what characterized my kind of upbringing the early years was I was born into community. And so my parents lived in a Christian community, and I was born into that. So there were several families that all lived in the same building, and I was born into that situation, which is kind of unique, I think. And again, my siblings were considerably older than I was, all right? But I have pretty good memories of my childhood up until about the age of 12. And as I talk about life, I think you've probably heard of the dips and valleys or the peaks and valleys of life. And this is how I would, as I have spent time kind of thinking back on my life, this is how I would kind of picture it, right? Slow descension into a long valley. And then it goes back up here. All right? To be determined. All right? So what I've just explained to you was part one of my life. All right? And I have fond memories of that time. But then I went to a very small Church of England, which is the national school in England. I went to a very small school. I have fond memories of that time. I had good friends. I felt like, as much as I can remember, I could be myself. And then overnight that changed because that school closed down, and I had to go to a much bigger school. Anyone changed school before in their childhood? Was that a fun memory or a challenging memory?
It actually turned out all right.
It did? It was challenging, right? And part of what we do at Habitat is we try to help create a stable environment for families so that the kids don't have to change schools. I had to change schools. It was much bigger. It was much, I'll label it as rougher. All right? There was a lot more that I was exposed to in that school than I was in the other school, not the good exposure. All right? And so instantly I found myself in a much more challenging situation. And as the youngest of three, my elder siblings were experiencing life a good amount further along than I was, I found myself in this situation where I had this challenge at school where I started lacking a lot of confidence. I started living kind of within myself, in my head, all right, because I struggled to kind of create a lot of close friends in this kind of environment. And it was a hard period of my life, okay? And so I share these things because that defined a lot of my personality, all right? And your whole life dictates a lot of things when you move forward. All right, and so for me, this was a key moment in my life was when I changed schools. Okay, I felt like my parents gave a lot of attention. This is in hindsight to my older siblings because they were experiencing things first. If you're a younger sibling, maybe you have that youngest child syndrome. But they weren't able to give me as much attention. They loved me. I have no doubt about that. All right. But I always felt like I didn't get as much as they do as far as schooling and, you know, what we were going to do and stuff like that. So therefore I had these kind of, I would say it was a little bit more lonely through those years. And that developed in me this, I processed life a lot in my head, okay? And that's a lot of what my personality is today, is I'm an internal processor. And a lot of it is in the head as opposed to the heart or the gut, all right? Then I would say a lot of my childhood, I didn't really like school. I didn't care for it because a lot of, again, I grew up in an industrial town. It was rough. I had this sense that I always had to be looking over my shoulder wherever I went, whether I was going to school, coming from school, at school. You know, it was always this sense of look around you and make sure you're looking over your shoulder. And so there was this kind of survival mindset that I went into. And again, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back on my childhood, that's what a lot of my childhood was like, okay? And so schooling, if you're in a survival mindset, becomes much harder because it's more about surviving rather than thriving and excelling in everything that you do. But the thing that got me through a lot of my childhood was a passion for sport. Okay, any sports girls in the room? Not many? Okay. And this was my first taste of what it feels like to be driven towards something. Okay, yes, it's sport, but and and it was an individual thing. I couldn't get enough of having a soccer ball at my feet and practicing. You know, I'd watch it, then I'd go outside and I'd want to mimic it. And that was the first time in my life that I'd really kind of experienced this drive to get something done, okay? And I think this is an important concept in leadership as well, is when you're doing something that you really want to do, the drive level goes way through the roof, okay? So whether it was playing tennis, playing soccer, this was something that I really experienced that feeling of drive, okay? Let's see. I think also in the early years of my life, I recognized what I didn't want to be involved in. My parents were teaching me good lessons, and then I saw bad examples at school, and this really gave me a strong sense of principle. All right, there are the good things to be involved in the world, and there are the bad things to be involved in. But a lot of what I learned about leadership through my childhood was from my parents. As I said, they were strong Christian people, and the way they lived out their faith had the biggest impact on me when I was a kid. And what that looks like is not just going to church. That probably had less impact on me than actually the way they lived it out. And so, first of all, they take the commandment of, you know, loving God and then loving others, which is, as a Christian, is the biggest commandment that we're called to follow. And I noticed that the most in the way they loved others. There were many times as a child where I can remember specifically 4 different people or families that they actually invited to live in our house. All right? And so that was huge for me because I got to experience that and I got to see what that looks like. All right? It's not just swooping in and helping people and swooping out. They're inviting them in and saying, hey, come be a part of our family for an extended period of time because you're in a tough situation. Second thing is I can remember specifically watching out the window as my parents rescued this lady that was getting beat up by her boyfriend right outside our house. They didn't call the police. They just stepped outside and they jumped in and they stopped this thing. All right? This was the kind of neighborhood that I grew up in. And that was a huge example of leadership for me, where it was putting other people before yourself. And then other things that they did that really influenced who I became as an individual, teaching me good manners. You know, a lot of people get taught that. The love of good food and cookery. My mother really takes that seriously. And then also travel was a huge part of what we did as a family. Loading up a tiny car with a roof rack on, driving, you know, up to Scotland or to, you know, all the way to the south of France and camping along the way, keeping bird counts along the way. All of those kind of things really influenced my love of the outdoors and also, love of nature and those kind of things. All right. So that was the early years. And, but as we go into, I did go to college, but these were the kind of the darkest years of my life. I hated college. I'm coming out of this period where I'm lacking confidence because I've been, struggled to make friends. I had good friends, but I didn't feel like I could truly be myself with them. You're in this survival mindset and, always looking over your shoulder. And so therefore confidence is low and you don't truly know who you are as an individual. All right, and I think it's really important as a leader that you truly know who you are as an individual. And so college, it didn't set me up for success at college. And those were the darkest years. And so then I sought after things from an acceptance standpoint instead of what the drive that I was talking about earlier. All right, and you may have been around some of these folks at college that they just kind of lack direction on what they're supposed to be doing. That was me when I went to college. I didn't know why I was there. I didn't have a strong drive to do well there. I felt like I was supposed to be there, and that was it. And then while I was there, I just got involved in things that I probably shouldn't have got involved in. And those were probably the darkest times of my life, which led me to this point once I came out of college where I'm asking the question, what do I want to do with my life? A lot of you maybe already know that. I didn't when I came out of college. And I knew that I had, again, these things that I enjoyed earlier, all right? And so I loved travel. I loved working with kids. And I loved kind of getting involved in kind of teaching situations as well. I thought I wanted to be a PE teacher. And so I signed up for this one summer experience to come to America 20 years ago to come and work at a camp that's north of town, about 20 minutes, Camp Tecumseh YMCA. Anyone been there? Yeah? At college or when you were a kid? When you were a kid? Wait.
Second grade.
Second grade? Which school?
I went to Mohawk Trails, but we just had a field trip over there.
I worked with Mohawk Trails several times, yep. How about you?
I did it in college, but my siblings did it as kids. I missed the sign-up since I got too old.
Okay, all right. So I decided, I got accepted to come and work as a counselor for one summer in America at Camp Tecumseh YMCA. And that summer changed my life. Because I came into, and I didn't know it before I came, but I came into this community that was, one, accepting. All right, I found people that were encouraging and met me where I was at and encouraged me. All right, it's a strong Christian camp, but I was kind of searching at that point. There's a strong Christian influence throughout this story, but they accepted me where I was at. All right, and then I got to do a job where I'm outside teaching kids, involved in sports, and it was like, it all made sense. All right, but it was just for one summer, or so I thought. Okay, I came back the next year, and I did the same thing again, except I started working with school groups. He came with his school, probably second grade, you said, right? And I did that for a while. The next year, I came back again, and I worked as this was kind of my first leadership position, if you like, in one of the units that they have. I was responsible not just for teaching kids, but I was kind of the supervisor for my peers as well, all right? So I learned some things about leadership there. Then I joke that I met my wife there. We always joke, I needed a green card and she fell for the accent, all right? I can say that because I'm happily married 18 years later, all right? But I met my wife at camp. There are many people that meet their spouses at camp because you see each other at your best and your worst. You spend this intense kind of summer together where you live there. You go through the ups and the downs together, and it's because of that, it's a great place to meet people, all right? It's not designed that way, but it is, all right? So I did that, and so about here, I got married, okay, which we're talking about leadership that involves all aspects of life, all right? And then I got a full-time job there. And in this full-time job, worked with adults, helping adults have a camp experience, all right? So college age and older. And so from a confidence level, I came into this thing low on confidence, and this whole process right here was just building my confidence around supportive people, put in situations that were challenging, but again, in a position where people were encouraging you to take this challenge and walking with you through this process, all right? And for me to teach kids, the first year was slightly intimidating. I'm responsible for coming up with this lesson. Now you're saying I've got to teach adults, all right? So I keep upping the challenge, but it was good and it was healthy, all right? And then about here, this is where they asked me to take on a more major leadership position, all right? So not just responsible for leading programs with participants coming through, but more of the big picture that's going on at camp, all right? And so at that point, I was responsible for overseeing 50-plus counselors during the summer. I was hiring, training, program oversight, all of those logistics, organization, intentionality through programming, all right? All of that I was responsible for. And then at this point right here, then it went to the next level where I was overseeing all of programs. And so they're hiring, usually 120 people during the summer, your age, college age, that are coming in for the summer. And this is not just supervising, but it's big picture. What outcomes do we want to come out of this program? Camp is more than just the activities that happen there, all right? For Tecumseh, for example, you may know some things about camps. Some camps have certain things that they specialize in, and so maybe you've been to like a soccer camp or a sports camp or an arts camp or these kind of things. What we tried to specialize in was relationship development, all right? So how do you help people connect with kids their own age and make healthy relationships or help create healthy relationships? How do you help the counselors that are living in the cabin become role models for these kids so that they have someone they look up to, feel comfortable with, can learn from, all of those kind of things? And how do you do that for, there's usually about 6,000 kids that come through there every summer. 520 kids a week check in every Sunday and leave on a Saturday. And you want every single kid to have that experience. How do you do that? Okay, and so what my job with other people was to help make sure that that happened for all the 520 kids that came through, not just the individuals. Same for the school experiences, all right? So that made me, this I would say was the building years. This was the applying years right here, okay? And there are a lot of failures as a leader, and there are a lot of successes, okay? As I was going through this journey right here, what I realized is that this is the camp experience right here we see as a training ground. And you think of a training ground a lot for the kids that come through, but I think it's a training ground for the staff as well. We realize that we probably have more impact on the staff that work there for 10 weeks than the kids that come there for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. We hope they keep coming back and they're on this track where they keep growing and growing and growing. But really, we have the most impact on the counselors that come through there. All right? And so that became the driver. If the counselors are having a great experience and they're learning and they're growing, that can only mean good things for the kids that are coming through as well. All right? But this is a training ground, and it was a training ground for me as well. I loved this job. And I talked about drive earlier. There were many times in my positions that were there that I could not wait to get up in the morning. The drive was so high to create intentional programming that was creative, that met people where they were at, and that hopefully had the outcomes that we wanted, right? We didn't want people leaving camp the same that they were beforehand. We wanted them to grow from the experience. And a lot of that is on the kind of culture that you create, all right? And so culture building became a big part of what I was about as a leader, and how to try and help other leaders within camp be on the same page and create that synergy so that when the kids came, it really created this fantastic experience for them. That make sense? So, what questions do you have at this stage about leadership? I haven't really gone into any concepts because I'm more interested in what you want to learn about leadership. So what questions do you have? I'm just telling you part of my story. What are you most interested in about leadership that maybe has sparked some things here? Yeah.
So you mentioned like you had successes and failures in your journey of leadership. And so what would be like your failure and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I guess I'll land on what I've learned a little bit. For me, I think so many things in life are about finding a healthy tension. All right, so as a leader, if you think about assertive and passive, I think there's a healthy tension somewhere in the middle there. All right, it's not a balance, it's a tension. All right, there are times, and some of you, when I was about this stage, I learned the definition for leadership is helping others be successful. That's how they define leadership at camp. It's very simple, but this is the time that I had conversations with 6th graders about leaders don't have to be the most vocal ones, right? Or the most assertive ones. And there are times in my leadership journey where I would say, especially like right here, after I've been in this position for a year and I felt like I got it figured out, I became way too assertive. And I jumped on people a lot more when they made mistakes, right? And so I think there's a tension right here in the middle between, being assertive and being passive, okay? Other things I would say that I've learned with this, finding a healthy tension, is tradition and progression, right? This camp has been around for 90 plus years, and they've had a strong traditional program for that time. And I come in, and several of us started asking, why do we do this? all right? And some people feel threatened by that. Well, it's what we do. It's what we've done for a long time. Well, I'm going to throw out there that I don't think this is as effective as you think it is, right? And so let's not just do it for the sake of it. But at the same time, on the other end, you don't just want to throw traditions out the window that have got you to where you are. And so you have to ask these questions, right, between the two. And I've made mistakes on both sides of that as well, I would say. So does that make sense? I can remember specific times, though, where I really blew it with counselors in my approach to addressing problems with them. And the longer I was there, the more I realized this is about meeting people where they're at in the same way that people met me where I was at, and moving from that point. All right? And so, again, there's a balance there, or a tension between the two. Any other questions? No. What are you most interested in about leadership? Yeah.
What were like some of the things you learned going from like the younger students to the older students and like adapting the leadership style?
Yeah. What I learned, part of it is when I'm facilitating team building events, a lot of adults struggle with the same things that a lot of the sixth graders struggled with, right? They think they know it, but putting it into, applying it in these kind of situations, I realized that was the same thing. But I also, in those kind of situations, that's where I felt like I grew as a leader in creativity, in finding out more about the groups I was working with before they came in. And when you know exactly what they're trying to get out of it, then it helps you to create something that is going to meet those needs, as opposed to assuming this works for every group, right? I had to grow in confidence standing in front of a group of adults. And so there are times, and maybe you felt like this, before you go into something that is challenging. I can remember very vividly along this journey where you're like, I don't want to do this. And I think that's an okay place to be, right? Where I'm a big John Maxwell fan. He said this quote: "Everything worthwhile is uphill." Just think about that for a second. Everything worthwhile in life that you work for is uphill, right? So I got married in the middle here. Is marriage easy? Nope. You got to work at it every day. Is leadership easy? Nope. You got to work at it every day. And I think sometimes we come into these positions and you think, oh, this is going to be perfect. It meets all of the things that I desire in a job. And then you get into it, it's like, man, this is hard. But everything worthwhile is uphill. And so I can remember very specific situations where before you go into it, you don't want to do it, right? For me, again, it is a confidence thing. Standing in front of a group of people at camp the first year, I'm standing in front of a group of people, I want nothing to do with the large group activities. But over time, when you put yourself in that position where you say, I want to do that, but it's hard, that's a good place to be. So, yep. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. How do you keep passion and drive up? That's a good question. Well, here, I forget who came up with this quote, but, with a strong tradition at camp and so many people coming through and having the positions that you've had and looking up to those people, I think the tendency is to say, I want to be exactly like them, and I think that's not the right thing. You need to be you. That's part of the reason I'm telling you my story. It's my story. It's not like anyone else's story. Okay? Nobody else has the experiences that I have. And we would tell people this at the beginning of team building experiences. This group will never be the same again because you'll never have this exact group of people in the same room. But I forget where I was going. What was the question again? Passion and drive, right? So not trying to replicate people before you, I think is really important. And so I heard somebody say, you have to create a winnable game.